Welcome back, everyone. We'd like to carry on with our panel discussion featuring 4 former editors of the Villanovan. We have
and a baby.
Marianne and one baby.
A future editor, too. And a future editor.
Marianne Lavelle is now senior editor of Energy, National Geographic Digital Media. We have Larry Goanos, who is Chief Executive Officer at Andros Risk Services. Jim DeLorenzo, founder and CEO of Jim DeLorenzo Public Relations. And Kate Szumanski, Director of Communication and Professor in the English Department here at Villanova. If you all would like to, one at a time, introduce yourselves and tell what your position was on the Villanovan and talk a little bit about what working on the Villanovan meant to you and what you think of this digitization project. That would be great. Who'd like to start?
Should we go? I'll start? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to just thank everyone who worked on this project. It's funny, for me, being on the Villanovan was just such a big part of what I did here at Villanova. And when I looked around, I realized what a small part of the history of Villanova. I mean, 1/100th of the history of this paper, but there's something about being a small part of something that's so big that made you care about it too, and work to preserve it and have it be there for us and for everyone to really look back and see some insights about where we are now from our past. And I really so appreciate. And sorry I'm losing my voice. I'm going to try to project as well as I can. I'll just open really quickly by talking about what I do now. I'm an editor at National Geographic's website, and I'm responsible for one subject area, which is energy, which is a very important subject for National Geographic. National Geographic's mission is inspiring people to care about the planet. And there's just nowhere where people on the planet are more in conflict these days than over energy. We need energy to fuel civilization, and yet the way that we go about deriving our energy now, mostly from fossil fuels, is a very big threat to the planet. One of the biggest threats we face, and energy seems like a very big problem when we think of the energy we use on our flat screen TVs and our mobile devices and everything here, but it's an even bigger problem when you think of the 1.5 billion people in the world who have no electricity at all, 5 times the population of the US, and the 3 billion people who are cooking on primitive cook stoves and wood and dung, and it's a very big challenge that we face in trying to find a way to provide energy in a cleaner way and help to end the cycle of poverty that really energy is very much intertwined with. And you absolutely have to approach that subject with a great deal of humility. And it's within National Geographic's mission to approach it that you are part of the community, the world community that is dealing with this challenge. And that's where being an editor of the Villanovan was part of it, because you were part of the community that you were covering. And when you're part of the community and you care about the community, that doesn't mean you see everything as peachy, and so you're scrutinizing, but you are caring about this community. And I think that that's what resonates for me. There's always this debate in journalism about objectivity and detachment and how important that is. And I do believe it's important to not have your eyes clouded by bias, but it's important. The value of the human eye over the camera's eye is that it's connected to a human heart, and that is that's just so much of what I feel that I learned at Villanova. I went back and looked at Villanova's mission statement. Not only is Villanova older than National Geographic as an institution, it has a longer mission statement. And so, but in a way, it's a great mission statement. It has this inclusiveness and caring about a more just, more peaceful world. And if you read about it, this phrase I wrote down, the university advances a deeper understanding of the relationship between faith and reason. And wow, that's a pursuit of a lifetime. And there's a moral compass or a moral sense about, and whether it's your whatever faith tradition you're in and whatever your degree of faith at this time, there was a sense of we're in this as a community with a knowledge of what's right and wrong and trying our best to navigate that. And I think back at the calls we made, and Beth White Delaney's here, we were on the Villanovan together, and she's right there.
Oh. There she is. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say hi to her.
As she knows, it was not always a comfortable place to be, and I can't even, looking back today, say that we always made the right decisions, but we always did our best, like guided by this reckoning of what we felt was just and right, and that was really, I think, what makes Villanova and the Villanovan special. And the last thing I just wanted to say was about June Lytell, June Lytell Murphy, who was our advisor and our mentor. And she was, when I think back my first conversation with her, she was the first person I knew who had an answering machine. And that's how long ago it was, 1977, or when I started at Villanova. And she, when I called her up, I was so nervous. I think I left her phone number on her own answering machine. But she was such a person of such poise and presence, and so it was very intimidating before you really got to know her and have her as your advocate, which she was. And I think that I never really appreciated at that time how hard that was, because I was only here for a year, but she was here for the long term. And so every fight that we had and every uncomfortable story we wrote, whether it was about the new Connolly Center and the leaks in the roof, and or the problems at our time, not enough housing on campus, to pick just one of the more benign things. Beth and I could talk about even more uncomfortable things, but she was always really on our side. And there's I don't know how many students are here. They all have class and everything, I'm sure. But when you go into journalism today, it's really dire times for journalism. There's a lot of, the whole business model of journalism has collapsed, basically. And I've had a great run being in it for 32 years at this point, but I don't even know how long I will last. My energy project is funded by one advertiser at this point, who's a multinational oil company. And so talk about every day, and I'm proud to say, if you look at our coverage, we pull no punches, and there's if you want to see any pictures of what that Gulf oil spill looked like up close, you can go to our website and see it in all of its horror. But really, every day, kind of that moral compass and that moral reasoning is something that is just a really important part of what you do. And when I think of the model of courage and integrity and indomitable spirit, I think of June Lytell, and that is such an inspiration to me today.
I don't really want to follow that. I'll let Jim go next. I'll start out with my June Lytell memories. So I signed up as a freshman for the Villanovan back in 1980. Even though I know I look a lot younger, but whenever I think of her, I never had her for class. Some of the editors and writers had her for class. I never did, so I only knew her in the context of the paper. And I was somewhat, I would say, of a smart ass back in the day, as I still am today. When we were sitting here, when the other speakers were talking, Jim had all his notes here, and he turned his back, and I slipped his notes into my pocket, and he looked over, and he was getting all nervous, just to let you know what kind of wise ass I am.
I just kind of knew it was him.
Yeah, but so. I not in an evil way, but sort of a smart-ass way. So anyway, every Tuesday we would go down to this place down Lancaster Ave to set up the paper. And in those days it was like ancient civilization. You cut and you used wax and you put it on a form, and if there was a typo, you had to cut the letter out and put another letter in. So I can't remember the name of the place now. RK Graphics, that's it. So
Just remember there was a Dunkin' Donuts and a Roy Rogers.
Yeah.
Roy Rogers.
Yeah.
So I used to always make wisecracks constantly because we're there like 6-8 hours and everybody's getting on edge, and I'm always jabbing at people with comments and maybe even the knife once in a while. But June always had a comeback. She was like one of the few people I knew, especially like a faculty member, who didn't hesitate to get down in the trenches, and I could never get one past her. She would always be right back in my face. So eventually I stopped making wisecracks to her because I knew she was coming back. But one other sort of weird memory, I was trying to think of this on the way here. And I was talking to my wife, who was also on the paper. Villanovan gave me, besides lessons in life, gave me my wife, who I just married in May, 29 years after we first met. It took 29 years. I had to make sure it was right, but we got married. But anyway, so I was asking her for stories too. But one thing I always remember, one time we were at June's house or apartment for some reason, like a Villanovan social thing for the editors, and she went on and on about Lena Horne and how she loved Lena Horne and saw her on Broadway. And to this day, anytime I hear Lena Horne's name, I think of June Lytle. It's like always reminds me of her. But she will be missed. It's hard to believe she's gone because she was so lively and full of spirit. So I'll tell you real quick, currently I'm in the insurance industry. I went to law school after Villanova. I went to BC, practiced law for 5 years, and now I'm in the insurance industry. I have a consulting firm. So I'm the CEO, but it's only one person. So I'm also the last guy on the list. But so first year, Villanova, first week, I signed up for the paper in 1980. And Beth, who I didn't realize is here, was the sports editor. And so I signed up for the sports department. And I go up to the office. For some reason, I don't know how this luck befell me, but she said it was our last year of Division 1A football. And we had a home game. It was the first game against Richmond. And she says to me, Larry, all the senior editors were going on I think they called it a retreat. It was probably a party somewhere. But she says, we're all going on a retreat. And so you're going to cover the home football game. And this is my very first assignment, right? And so I didn't know anything. She goes, here's your press pass. I go, oh my God, this is awesome. I'm going to show this at the tailgates. I have a press pass. And she says to me, now, I know you don't know much about the team yet. Pay attention. There's one particular player. After the game, try and get an interview with him. His name is Howie Long. So I said, okay, I'll try. I didn't know anything about it. So one of us has gone on to a great career in the media. I won't tell you which one. You try and guess for yourself. But we lost the game 7-3. He blocked a punt. I'm in the locker room. Sitting down, he's bigger than I am standing up. And he was crying his eyes out. I still remember. I was so intimidated. Here's this gigantic football player crying his eyes out. And I was an idiot freshman. I'm like, Howie, can I ask you a couple questions? And I will never forget. He stopped crying and he totally composed himself. He was such a gentleman, such a nice guy. And I asked like this great question: how did it feel to block that punt? Like, it was like stupidest question you could ask, but he was very polite and kind and patient. He could have easily said, you're from the school paper, leave me alone. So that was my first experience with Villanovan. 4 years later, I ended up being the sports editor when I was a senior, and it was a great experience. I'm just going to tell you 2 lessons I think I learned. So one of my proudest accomplishments professionally is I wrote a book in 2008 about the insurance industry, my segment, which is professional lines, which insures like boards of directors and lawyers, doctors, basically for their professional acts, so malpractice in a way. So I wrote a book in 2008, sort of the history of professional lines, but tinged with some other things, a lot of war stories. I ended up interviewing over 400 people. So 2 most valuable lessons I learned in this process. The first one is there's a saying that it's very accurate, and I hope the people over here are listening too because it'll help these students. It's you have to schedule greatness. So when I decided to write this book, it was about 2005, and a few people I knew in the industry had retired, some others had died, and I said, you know what, it's a shame. These people are leaving the industry. No one's ever going to know what they did, what their accomplishments were. I'm going to write this book, sort of an oral history. So for the first year and a half, I said, whenever I get a chance, I'm going to work on this book. So in a year and a half, I had 20 pages done. Because it's like anything else in life. You want to work out, you want to paint a picture, write a book. If you say, I'll just do it when I get a chance, you never do it because everything fills up your day. So then I took this job. I was living in Manhattan. I took a job up in Westchester County that required a 1-hour commute on the train each day, both ways. So I said, I'm not going to read the New York Post when I get on the or New York Times, excuse me. Did I say New York Post? But I said, I'm not going to read the paper. I'm going to open my laptop and work on this book. So I had a forced schedule every morning for 1 hour up, 1 hour back. Some days I would get one paragraph written, but it adds up if you just stick with it and keep to your schedule. So in the next year and a half, I went from 20 pages to 376 pages just by keeping that schedule. And no matter what you want to do, you got to schedule your greatness. I learned that because at the Villanovan, when you had deadlines, there was no pushing it back. You had to have the article done. It had to be in, come hell or high water, or your name or your section's going to be out there with no articles, and you'd be embarrassed and all those things. So that sort of was the first sort of lesson I learned in keeping a deadline. They say goals without deadlines are just dreams. You really have to set a deadline for whatever you want to do. And I learned it on the Villanovan, and it came to fruition in my personal life. So the next aspect of the book, and I did learn a lot of lessons, but just to give you the second most important. There's a Canadian minister named Basil King. I don't know if he's still alive, but he had a saying, be bold and great forces will come to your aid. So my thing was, when I was here at the paper at Villanova, I got to interview Howie Long, Dean Smith, Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, and I just went in and said, screw it, I'm going to give it a shot. And these people would stop and talk to you and give you the time of day, and you really can't be a shrinking violet. You just have to get out there and assert yourself. So when I finished the book in November of 2008, the publisher sends me a bunch of copies, sort of the promotional copies, and I started sending them out to people, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to send these to some big name people, see if I can get a quote so we could sell. All the proceeds from the book goes to 4 different charities. So I didn't really feel self-conscious when I was writing the book and I was calling up CEOs of companies, asking them for their time. All the money was going to charity. And a few things fell into place during that process, which I won't go into right here. But so I take a copy of the book and I mail it off to Warren Buffett in Omaha, Nebraska. And I had no connection to Warren Buffett, never met him, didn't know him or anything. But I said, you know what do I have to lose? So I was bold, took a chance, send it off. A week later, I get a call from his secretary on my cell phone. She goes, Larry, this is Deb Bosonic, personal assistant to Warren Buffett. And she was just at the State of the Union this past year. I don't know if you saw her. But so I go, yes, Deb. And she goes, Mr. Buffett got your book, but unfortunately he's too busy to read it, but he thanks you for sending it. And I said, well, thank you for calling. Most people would throw it in the garbage. I'd never hear from him. I appreciate the call. So I hang up. I was with my sister and some friends who were at the beach. Oh, that was Warren Buffett's assistant, blah, blah, big man. But he wasn't going to read it. So that was November of 2008. July of 2009, right after 4th of July weekend, I opened my email one morning from Warren Buffett. And I was like, no freaking way. I figured one of my friends is paying trick on me. Larry, I read your book. I totally enjoyed it. I hope all my insurance managers read this book, blah, blah. And he said specific things that let me know he really did read it. He wasn't just, and I was shocked. I said, I cannot believe this. So it was a Thursday when I got the email. I waited till Monday to respond. I talked to some of my friends because I wanted to use his quotes to help sell the book, because I figure if somebody sees Warren Buffett's name, they just buy it. Everybody wants to be like Warren Buffett, especially in the business world. So one of my friends said, well, he said he hopes all his insurance managers get a copy. Why don't you send him 10 copies and ask him if he can use his quotes? Because I didn't want to just use them and then have him have a lawyer call me. Oh, that was just between him and you. He's not pushing your book. So Monday morning, I write him back an email. I said, Dear Warren. It took me about half an hour to decide, Dear Mr. Buffett, Dear Warren. Finally, I said, he called me Larry. I'm calling him Warren. Screw it. So I said, Dear Warren, I said, thank you very much for your kind comments. I'm having sent 10 copies of my book to your assistant from the publisher. Please give them to whoever you'd like. They're complimentary on me. And then I said, and this is not quid pro quo, but of course it really was. I said, it's not quid pro quo, but do you mind if I use your very kind comments in our advertising to sell the book? As you know, all the proceeds go to charity, and he's a big philanthropist, so I knew he'd like that. So I said, if you say no, that's fine. I totally understand. I'm just happy you read it and sent me the email. But, if you did say yes, it would help us sell the books. So I send this off at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, and I'm thinking, he's always on CNBC, traveling all over. It's probably going to be a long time since I hear back. 1 hour later, he writes back, and he says, Larry, I'd be delighted. So use my quotes. I hope you sell every copy, and the charities get a big check. And so ever since then, the book is almost sold out. We printed 4,000 copies. And I've actually emailed him 3 or 4 times since on different issues, and he writes me back like within an hour. It's unbelievable. The guy's really, and they're all because I just was bold and took a chance. And that's what I would say, whatever your endeavors, especially people like Kendra who are students now, and go out into the world, just take a chance, don't hold back, and schedule your greatness.
Well, thank you for. I joined the dark side of the force after that. I was introduced to the Villanovan as a freshman, the same year as Larry. I was in Stanford Hall. Father Gallagher was RA there, and a longtime friend, and knew Father Gallagher back when I was in Trenton at Incarnation Parish, and he used to come and visit. So it's always nice to see Father Gallagher. It's been a long time. I lived in Stanford Hall, and somehow or another I finagled a way where I stayed in Stanford Hall in the same room, on the same side of the room, 245D for 4 straight years. I never had to live off campus. I had 3 homes when I was a student at Villanova. The 245D, 201 Doherty, and the second floor of the field house. And all those roads kind of converged. My next door neighbor in the dorm was a gentleman by the name of Bill Clark, who was a writer and an editor at the Villanovan when Beth and Marianne were there. And he said, "We need writers." And I had actually come to Villanova under probably misconception that I was going to be an artist. I was going to draw comic books and do animated cartoons, and then I was accepted to Villanova because I had connections to the football program, and they brought me in on a partial scholarship as a student manager of the football team. I did Howie Long's laundry. And Bill Clark came to me one day and says, "We need writers at the Villanova, and do you want to write?" And I said, "Well, I'll give it a shot." So they assigned me a story. I think it was a university senate meeting or something. I showed up, and I covered it like I was covering the Watergate hearings or something. And I wrote a story, and he edited it and worked with me on it, and kind of sparked my creativity in a way that instead of becoming a cartoonist or an animator or all those other crazy ideas I had, I decided I wanted to become a writer. So through Bill and through other people at the Villanovan, Beth, Dave Koski, and a few other people, I started going up to the Villanovan and writing stories once every 2 weeks or so. And by the end of my freshman year, I was asked if I wanted to be an assistant news editor. I said, "Sure, why not?" So I came on the staff as an assistant news editor my sophomore year. At the same time I was doing that, I had been the student manager of the football team. They dropped the program on April 14th, 1981. That became kind of like a focal point of my journalism career at Villanova, because I became the staff writer covering the football situation. So for the next 3.5 years, I covered everything that had to do with dropping football, how they're going to bring back football, what would they do if they brought back football. So that became my beat. And when Father Donahue was speaking about Father Driscoll's file of Villanovan clippings, I am certain that my name was flagged in that file several times, because Father Driscoll on at least 3 occasions called me personally into his office for one-on-ones in which he explained to me what I was doing wrong or how upset he was with something. And I'd gotten to know his secretary so well because of my frequent visits to his office that she actually left me a statue in her will when she passed away. It was just an interesting time, and getting to work at the Villanovan, and then at the same time I was working in the athletic department. They dropped football. I had become part of the orbit of the Sports Information Office, which is the public relations arm of the athletic department. And I would go in there 2 or 3 days a week. I would go into the Villanovan office 2 or 3 days a week, and I never really spent much time in my dorm room. But I was speaking earlier, I had a manual portable typewriter, and I would pound out stories on my manual portable typewriter, and I would bring them into the office, and we would use our fold them in half, and submit them for consideration, and Professor Lytell would scrutinize them carefully, and Bill Clark would scrutinize them carefully, and Len Labarth and others would scrutinize them carefully, and I learned a lot of things. I still have my 1981 edition of the AP Style Manual on my desk. I consult it frequently. Professor Lytell was a great influence on me. For some reason, we would have rather spirited discussions about pop culture. For those of you who did not know her or only know her through her reputation, Professor Lytell was the type who would proofread billboards as she was driving to and from a location. And she would come into the Villanovan office, or she would come up to the print shop, and she would say, "I just saw this billboard, and this is spelled wrong," or this is spelled. And we would laugh because we really had at that time you had no reference point. You had to be in the car with her. You know, it wasn't like today where we're so digitized and networked. The other thing I also remember was she was very current on pop culture. And you mentioned going to her apartment. I thought it was the most sophisticated apartment I had ever been in. You know, I was just some schmuck from Trenton. I didn't know any better. And we went to her apartment one night, and it was like being in the Algonquin Round Table. And I just remember how sophisticated she was to me and to my colleagues. I remember her nails and her bracelets, and she would stick a finger out and the bracelets would shake, and she had her initial on one of her nails in like a jewel form. And we got into this heated argument one night about Billy Idol, which, you know, half of the people in this room probably have no idea who Billy Idol was, but at that particular time he was an up-and-coming rock star. And she just despised him. And she described in graphic detail what she was going to do to him if she ever saw him in person. And that's something that stuck in my mind, along with Professor Murphy discussing Hemingway, whether there's Motorcycle Gang or various other anecdotes along the way. I had Professor Lytell for class on many occasions. I took women's studies just so I could have her for class. I took journalism just so I could have her for class. I just really enjoyed her as a person, and she was a great inspiration to me. And after I graduated from Villanova in 1984, I was fortunate to be offered a full-time job at the university within days of my graduation. And one of the things I'll always remember about Professor Lytell was that on the day of my graduation, right outside this building, she came over to me to let me know that I had been accepted into the graduate school at Villanova, and for the English master's program. And she was the one who told me that. I had not heard from anybody else yet, but that made my graduation that much more, like, that just colored the whole day even more. I had graduated, I had been accepted in the Villanova Graduate School, and I had gotten a job in the athletic department full time, all on the same day. And I couldn't have done all those things without those 4 years of trudging up to 201 Doherty, typing away on the rare electric IBM Selectric typewriters. And you mentioned the deadline being Sunday night, and getting everything has to be ready by Tuesday, and on the street by Thursday morning. We would have our editorial meeting on Monday night. We had to have our stories turned in by like 5 o'clock Tuesday night, typewritten. And we would edit them on Tuesday night. We would send them to the printer on Tuesday night for Wednesday morning. Thursday morning, we would go over to the printers and actually do the paste up, cutting and pasting the articles themselves. And Friday morning, they would be delivered to campus. And then we had to do a lot of the distribution and the handouts, and they would be all over the place. And one of the things I always remember is the stacks and stacks of the previous issues in 201 Doherty. All of us kind of crammed in there trying to write stories on deadline. People calling and asking if you could help with this. I remember Dean Balsamini was a classmate of ours. He had been doing freelance writing for like the Suburban and Wayne. At the same time, he was working for the Villanovan, and he was doing all these other things. Dean was a bit of a character even then, and he came to me one day. I'm sitting there working on some story for the Villanovan, and he says, I'm supposed to interview, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the boxer.
Billy Idol?
No, it was a,
Marvin Hagler?
it was Marvin Hagler. It was Marvin Hagler. He says, I'm supposed to interview Marvin Hagler at 1 o'clock. Can you do it? I said, sure. Like, and I had no idea why he was interviewing with it. But I knew in the headlines that Hagler had a big fight coming up. But I had also heard, and this is pre-internet. This is pre-talk radio. This is pre a lot of things. But I also had heard or read in one of the papers that Hagler was very upset about a recent fight that he had that he felt that he had won it on points, but it was a technicality that he lost the fight. So I asked him a couple questions right off the bat, introduced myself to him, started talking to him on the telephone, and then I asked him about the disputed fight, and he was like, oh, I'm glad you asked me about that. Nobody's asked me about that in a long time. And he went into this long answer about this fight, and it was just an amazing opportunity. As Larry mentioned, you had these amazing opportunities to talk to people, and you could talk to them as equals, even though you were an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old undergrad. You know, I would go into Father Driscoll's office, and he would say, come on in, Jim, let's talk for a few minutes. And I would sit there, and he would answer my questions. I met so many of the university's administrators and officials, and then when I began to work here, they would all remember me because I had talked to them in the past. And then on that side of the ledger, I got to work with some of the rising talent that were working at the Villanova on the sports side. They would come in and ask me for a press pass to the football game, or they would come in and ask me if they could have access to the basketball game and things like that. So I was able to continue my relationship with the Villanovan for another 11 years. I left Villanova in May of 1995, went to work for Professional Tennis Tour for 2 years, and traveled all around the country as their PR person. And then I went to work for an internet company in early 1997 and helped them with their PR and marketing and got them to a very successful IPO in the summer of 1999. And that's when I started my own business. So I've been on the print side, I've been on the digital side, I've been on the sports side, I've been on the business side, I've been on the entertainment side. I've had my hands in a lot of different things, and I wouldn't have had the ability to do all the different things that I have done in the last how many years if it hadn't been for those experiences, and if it hadn't been for Bill Clark coming to me one day and saying, would you like to write for the student newspaper? He was also trying to recruit me to be a part of Villanovans for Anderson, which was John Anderson's third-party candidacy for the 1980 presidential. But that's a story for another time.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I understand correctly, you were then a Villanova employee in '85 when the basketball team went
Yes.
big. General impressions of the time?
I have kind of a weird perspective on that because the athletic department and the university took probably everybody to Lexington, Kentucky for the Final Four, except me. They literally needed somebody to stay behind to run stuff because the same weekend of the Final Four, the baseball team was playing their home opener, the softball team was playing their home opener, there was a track meet in the stadium, there were 2 lacrosse games, there was a multitude of other collegiate events going on in the pavilion. Well, the pavilion wasn't there yet. In the stadium, the field house, and the baseball field. So they left me behind to be the acting athletic director on campus. So I watched the game, the game against Georgetown, on Rolly Massimino's couch on his TV, eating a Rosemont takeout pizza. And one of the other things that was kind of left to me was campus security. So here I am, 21, 22 years old, and they said, we need you to help coordinate campus security. So we're going to have the state policeman report to you. So I had the head of campus security and about 10 Villanova security guards, as well as about 10 Pennsylvania state troopers reporting to me during the course of the evening. So I'm proud to report this is the first time I've really publicly spoken about this, but that entire perimeter of Ithan and Lancaster was completely untouched by celebratory demonstrations. I actually saw a state trooper hit a guy over the head with a flashlight who was trying to get into the field house at like 1 o'clock in the morning to celebrate. And I was just kind of, oh, okay. It was a crazy time. It was very unexpected because the team had not done well in its last regular season game. They had lost by like 30 to Pittsburgh, at Pittsburgh. And then they had not done that great in the Big East tournament, but they got into the NCAA tournament and they played their hearts out. I've been friends with a lot of those guys ever since and before that. And when the game ended and Villanova had won, and I'm sitting in the office with the state troopers and the pizza boxes and what have you, and there was just this sound from across the street of just like this roar of excitement. And we went out, there used to be a hill at the top of Ithan and Lancaster out in front of the field house, and there was a circular driveway. So we went out to the top of the hill to watch as everybody came streaming out of the dorms. And they were coming out of Sullivan and Sheehan, and they were coming out of Stanford and Good Counsel, which were really the 4 big dorms at the time. And they're all coming to the intersection of Lancaster and Ithan, and they're tearing bushes out of the intersection, and they're throwing bushes into the middle of the street, and they're setting them on fire. And then there's this parade of cars that starts coming down from Ithan Avenue. They're coming down into Bryn Mawr, into Rosemont. They're all going to go to Kelly's and what have you. And they're coming down and they're honking their horns. So we're standing there, we're watching this impromptu parade come by. And my sister was a freshman a sophomore at Immaculata at the time. And I hadn't seen her for a couple days, but I saw her a lot. And the parade of cars is coming down Lancaster Avenue, and they're all beeping their horns, and they're shouting, and they're throwing cans, and there's bushes and shrubs on fire in the middle of Lancaster Avenue. And I see this convertible with all these girls. Some of them are on the hood of the car, some of them are in the back of the car, some of them are in the car standing up, and they're all got beer cans. And I look, and it's my sister. And Larry will probably remember, I think Joanne will probably remember, I've never had a beer in my life. I never went to Kelly's. I was like the only Villanova alumnus had never been in Kelly's.
You're legendary. That's because of that.
And here's my sister swigging a beer on her way down to Kelly's to celebrate the national championships while I coordinate the police activities up there. So it was a very interesting time. I also was, the next day, as they were all flying back from Lexington, and they had a parade in Center City, Philadelphia, and I was the only person, again, in the athletic department. So all the phones are programmed into this one office, and the phone is ringing off the hook, and I'm answering every call, and this was before voicemail, so I've got all these little wire out pads, and I'm writing everything down, and I've got a stack of pink slips for the athletic director, for Coach Massimino, and one of the calls comes in and goes, "Please hold for President Reagan's office." I'm like, uh-oh. So I don't know who the person was, but we would like to invite Coach Massimino and the team to visit the White House as soon as possible. And oh well, thank you. They're in the middle of a parade right now, but let me get all the information. I'll make sure we schedule. So I got the phone number, I got the person's name, I write everything out. Visit President Reagan at the White House, and I put it over a separate stack, and the bus with the team comes down Lancaster Avenue. It's about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they pull into the field house parking lot, and Coach Massimino's the first one out the door. And I'm standing there with my little pink note, and I said, "Coach Massimino, congratulations." It's no secret that he did not like me much. And I said, "Coach Massimino, I have a message for you from President Reagan. He would like you and the team to come and visit the White House as soon as possible." And what he said to me was unprintable. You can imagine what it might have been. And then he slammed the door in my face, and I walked away. So 2 weeks later, they went and visited the White House, and there was all this.
Did you get invited?
I did not get invited. But I do have a championship ring.
Oh, that's cool.
Which doesn't fit anymore. But I have a championship ring. I always like to say that I was not paid very well when I worked for Villanova, but I have enough jewelry and rings and watches and drinking glasses to last me the rest of my life.